Hello again. Today we're making some progress on the speaker boxes, mostly focusing on cutouts and just trucking along, trying to get things to the point where I can get them assembled. We're sitting at 3 weeks from the wedding, so it's definitely time to get these done and tested and on their way. Luckily, they aren't too difficult to actually build. Most of the processes are just kind of more tedious than anything at this point. I was using a template to route things out, and that has worked pretty well. I'm trying to implement things I've learned over the last decades to make things easier, but it really boils down to just being simple boxes. I do have to make sure components fit, so right now that what I'm doing is making sure the dish layout and the attenuators are laid out well. Since these are three-way speakers, and the idea is to make them sound the best that I can, one of the ways to do that is an active crossover that has a lot of different points where you can tweak things and eliminate certain frequencies based on the room. That's definitely something that I'll work on down the road. I've wanted to do that for a long time, but the only time I've ever actually used it was I helped with I think it was Wagstaff Music is what pops into my head. Anyway, it was a music store that was hired by one of the local radio stations, X96, to put on basically a DJ room, and this was this was a long time ago, 99, might have even been 98, 2000, somewhere right around there. It was a show that X96 started and ended up, they put it on every year annually for quite a few years. They'd rent out the state fairgrounds and put on numerous concerts throughout the day. I think that first year they had technically 6 different shows going at a time. They had setups with 4 stages out in various places on the fairgrounds, and then they had one room that was internal for some of the performances, and then they had another room that was all about sound amplification. And so they had DJs coming in from all around the country to perform, and they had booths from different vendors and things, and this music store was hired to be help set everything up and advertise everything, and it was a pretty slick setup. They knew that there was going to be a battle amongst the DJs for who could be the loudest, so they built in several different systems. The multi, I believe it was a 10 octave crossover, or is it a 20? It was probably a 20. But anyway, they had that for starters to make sure that the room didn't have any echoes or reverbs or anything like that. And we set that up initially, and then it was literally just forgotten for the rest of the show. And then they had a mixer on stage for the DJ that they could do pretty much whatever they wanted. Then that mixer fed into a live sound, so that was a DJ mixing mixer, and then that fed into a live sound mixer, so like a 14 or 20 channel mixer, and that just happened to be one of the channels that could be controlled. But the reason for that was because that way the DJs could never turn it up so loud that it would damage the system or injure people. And there was a lot of sound. I think they had somewhere in the range of 15 or 20 amplifiers for speakers all over the room. Yeah, I mean, it was, when we tested it, it was super loud if you let it. And I was there because we were friends with the people who ran the store, and they just wanted some extra hands setting things up and running the main system, which for the most part running the main system was just a matter of keeping a decibel meter and making sure things didn't get too loud, and so be it. It was a pretty sweet gig. We got into the concert for free, and we could walk around and check out other shows, and my DJ partner at friend at the time, Joel, he wandered around and checked out some of the shows. He liked some of the performers. I think they had, I want to say, Green Day and Cake were there. But to be honest, I was there for the equipment. I don't actually remember pretty much anything. I know I had some training as far as first aid, and that came in a little bit handy. They had a guy breakdancing just outside of the DJ booth, and I don't know what he was trying to do, or I don't know. Anyway, he was doing some spinning moves and rolled down on his back and was spinning, and it was rather impressive. And then he tried to flip or stand up or something, and he popped up into the air and didn't complete what he was trying to do, and he came down pretty hard and cracked his forehead on the pavement and quit moving. And so that was a little bit of an excitement. EMTs ended up coming over and taking him to the hospital, but other than that, it was pretty boring event. Like I said, the biggest challenge was the DJs themselves, because they knew they had a mixer, and so you could see them thinking about it, and every time they'd kind of glance over from their little battle mixer and their consoles, which they brought, that plugged into this DJ mixer, they would look around and look at it, and you could tell they're thinking, man, I think this should be louder. And so they'd reach over and they'd bump it, and it got a little bit louder, and they would, I mean, it was just kind of comical to watch. But then they would try and do it again and again and again. And in between each DJ, we would go and reset that, because it just wasn't doing them any good. Our control was where the actual volume control was, and they had one guy who got up on stage, and he felt, my perception was that he felt he had to to show up the girl that was DJing him before, or DJing before him. And right from the get-go, he didn't even test anything. He plugged his gear in, and he turned the mixer almost all the way to maxing. And then he started playing with the gain, which, I don't know, I guess the easiest way to describe volume and gain is that Volume is how much sound there is, and gain is how powerful that sound is or how intense that sound is. Ultimately, if they're used correctly, you can technically use either one to increase volume or increase decibels and overall loudness. Um, but if you start messing with the gain on a signal that's already maxed out, then you end up with clipping, which is where the sound is the sound signal is outside of the capability of the system one way or the other, and that's exactly what we were preventing with this multi-point system. So the DJ started by already maxing out a limiter that was in the system, which was there just to make sure that things didn't get too loud, and it was a limiter compressor. So it would take that signal, and if it got a really loud bass beat, for instance, it would compress that to make sure that everything was at a certain point, and didn't, and so that made it easy for us to control the overall sound. But he kept trying to bump this up and turn the gain up and turn the bass up and turn the mid up and turn the bass up and turn the gain, and then he pushed the volume all the way to the top, and it finally got all within 5 minutes of his 20 or 30 minute set. And finally it got bad enough that it started to sound like garbage because he was just clipping this system, and it was horrible. So it got bad enough that my task was then to go up and tell him, hey, you can't keep turning it up. We're controlling the volume out here. It's as loud as it needs to be for the room. And then I had to fix everything on it, and I kid you not, I didn't even get off the stage and he cranked it back up. So his set just sounded distorted and crappy. He was by far the worst DJ there. It was ridiculous. But it was a fun event. It was definitely an interesting, fun challenge. I learned a lot about some of the higher end side of gear. And like I said, we used some of that gear, and we sat and talked about sound the entire time we were there. It was pretty fun. And I think aside from walking from stage to stage, I remember seeing one performer, and I want to say their name starts with an M, but I can't remember, and somebody in the crowd took their shoe off and literally threw their shoe on stage and hit one of the band members. They were all bands that I'm not a huge fan of. Their music was far too harsh for my liking, so they obviously weren't very memorable. But yeah, that's all I remember about being outside of that room was just the medic incident, getting lunch, and I brought that back to the room, and then the shoe incident. It was an interesting day, but I spent the whole day learning, just talking with the crew and the owner of the company. It was a pretty good day. But I learned that since I am the only person ever controlling my system, I don't really have a need for a limiter compressor or even really the multi-octave crossover. I do know the function of that, and I have had a couple times where I wish I had one, because there has been some times where I get a feedback from the power supply, and that causes a hum, or it's usually called or referred to as a 60 hertz hum, because it's created from the electricity itself somehow amplifying through the system. I don't know honestly all of the details, but I know that if you get that particular sound, you can take the 60 hertz point on the crossover, drop that down, and then bring it back up till just before you start to hear it again, and then drop it down a couple notches, and you don't have any problems. I know you can also do the same thing with microphones, where you sometimes get a higher end reverberation as the microphone picks itself up, and you can notch that out with whatever frequency notch that is. So like I said, I've wanted to get something like that, but just never got around to adding it to the system, and we don't have any plans to get that at the moment. We looked into it and figured that it was just an expense that we didn't need, at least not yet. But yes, as far as the limiter goes, I thought that was an amazing piece of technology, and could definitely see its usefulness. But like I said, if I'm the one who's controlling the volume, I know to, at the start of any event, I turn it up to where I think it's going to be too loud, and then walk around the room, maybe 15 or 20 feet out from the speaker, and then make sure that it's not too loud at that point, and go to the center of the room and check things and adjust everything, and then I just leave it that way for the rest of the night. So that's where the footage for the day ends, though. I got most of the stuff done. I've still got a few things that'll need to be cut out, but this is the layout of the full range speakers. So we'll end the video with this, but for today. But this is kind of a little bit of a preview of what they'll look like when they're done. You can see the 12-inch woofer, the 4-inch woofer, and then the tweeter horn. So we'll finish this off there for today. Thank you as always for watching. God bless you and yours, and stay safe and healthy out there.